Hello, and you are listening to a special episode of our Steps podcast where we are talking about how do we know what we're going to work on when we do steps. So, for some people listening, you might have decided to do steps, or you might be interested and a bit intrigued. And it's very normal and understandable to ask the question, okay, well, if I did it, what am I going to work on? And it's a question that I've heard lots of people say, and it's a question that I've thought myself. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about it. And I'm here with Jamie and Lars, who are on the Steps team. And we're going to talk a little bit about our own experience and then maybe offer a few kind of pointers or suggestions about how we can engage with the process if we decide to do it. So, Lars, how did you decide what to work on when you decided to do steps?
Well, to be honest, my story is a bit, how can I say, probably a bit unusual. So I was on some kind of a retreat. I was by myself, trying to figure out what's wrong with my life because I had these symptoms of something is not right. And so it was actually by reading a book about another person's experience of going through the steps process. So right at the start of the book, he started to describe his symptoms. And it was almost like he was describing what was going on inside of me. And this was symptoms like, I judge myself without mercy. I'm very critical of others. I was very good at hiding it, but I was very critical of others. I was very preoccupied with what do other people think of me, and spent a lot of energy kind of controlling the narrative, controlling, or at least trying to control that they would think about me, what I wanted them to think about me, things like that. And this author was really good at describing it. So I was like, how does he know me so well? It was like finding a brother, or however you would call it, because it was so similar. And then he said, what I was struggling with was pride, which was a revelation to me. Probably shouldn't have been, but it was. I hadn't seen that was what was going on in my life. But obviously it was. I had no doubt when I read that. So that was actually how I ended up working on pride. Then maybe just to add to that, I did it generally the first round, but then I realized I need to work on more specific behaviors. So second time around, I believe I then worked particularly on judging myself and others without mercy. And then that's how it progressed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jamie, how about you? How did you know what to work on?
Well, the first time I did the course really was out of curiosity. And so I didn't really feel necessarily desperate or really particularly aware. I clearly wanted something to change. So I just said to my wife, actually, I'm thinking about doing steps. What do you think I should work on?
Dangerous question.
Yeah, so she actually said, I think maybe you could work on asking for what you need. So that's how I started, out of just this curiosity, asking, and that's what I worked on. On another occasion, I did the program. It was really a real moment of arrest and a real moment of, wow, the way I'm reacting to this negative feedback is disproportionate and unhealthy. And that occasion I realized, wow, every time the emotional temperature goes up, I start walking on eggshells. So it was a really specific moment of awareness. That's not healthy. Over apologizing, trying to keep everybody happy, lower the emotional temperature. So that was a clear behavior that I thought, wow, that would be good to be able to get rid of.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely found that I needed to kind of tune into some kind of self-reflection to work out what I was going to work on, because in my case, I felt like I had a number of behaviors that were dysfunctional. In the end, I worked on fear of rejection, but I was people pleasing. I was so worried about what other people thought. I wasn't putting my needs first. And And so there were so many behaviors, and I wasn't really sure which one to pick. And in the end, I had a chat with one of the facilitators on steps, and that helped me clarify what I wanted to work on. But I think, in a way, now looking back, having done steps, I probably could have picked low self-worth, and then I did that in a later steps. I could have picked kind of fear of conflict, but I just decided on fear of rejection. And there was a part of me that was like, oh no, what if I've missed it? What if I've got the wrong topic? And this kind of unease about, I guess my perfectionistic side wanted to tick all the boxes and fix everything. But actually, what I realized having done it was that whilst the topic and the issue is really important, it's actually less about that and more about the journey through the process with whatever I was working on.
Yeah, and I totally identify with that as something going on in me later on in the process. What I have found is that listening to my inner dialogue actually often gives me a clue. So what am I saying to myself about myself? It's a nasty question, isn't it, for many of us? Very few of us wake up in the morning and say, hello, beautiful you. You look very strong today. It's going to be great. I mean, probably there's a few, but most of us, we have a different kind of dialogue going on inside of us. And I think, and that's of course also part of the steps process. It's also finding peace with ourselves. So often in that inner dialogue, we probably have a clue in terms of what we might need to work on. But I totally agree with you, Lou, that it seems to be more generally how the process works in our lives. And we also talk about it having ripple effects, that almost no matter where I start, it has ripple effects into other areas of my life.
I would say as well, your body tells you. My body was telling me, why do I feel so uptight when I have to say something that maybe another person might not be happy with? And that was a starting point of this sense of I cannot speak, I cannot get out of my mouth. It's stuck. The words are stuck in my chest, and I think the process then gives an awareness and the information on the why. And so sometimes it would be I'm working on walking on eggshells. I got to step 7, realize, wow, the reason I'm so uptight is I see myself at the center of the universe, totally responsible for myself and totally responsible for keeping everybody happy. What's that? That's actually pride. I'm thinking I'm the center and God isn't. So yeah, looking at how you feel and your physical reactions can be a clue. And I think the other thing is I think you're right. You don't necessarily need to have a really precise understanding and awareness of the why at the beginning. But I think it's really helpful to have something that's specific and a behavior that you think, I think this could be it, not totally sure. And then to work on the problem, the problem behavior. So for me, I wouldn't be working on, I need to trust more. I'd be working on, actually, I'm overly responsible. And that's a behavior that's rooted in a kind of pride. But the more specific I got about the behavior, it felt that the process got much more traction, because I'm dealing with, hey, this is a thing I don't want to change. I like it. It numbs my pain. It makes me feel better. This over responsibility makes me small. I like being small, rather than thinking, oh, I just need to trust more.
I totally agree. And the times that I facilitated in groups where someone's been a bit more vague about what they're working on, I can see that it can be quite hard for it to stick or to really apply what they're kind of reading. And then working on the problem, not the solution as well. I've definitely experienced it's harder to do that because it's if you feel better about yourself if you're, say, working on trying to be a good friend than kind of working on, say, lying or something. But actually it kind of hits the nail on the head almost when you're being specific about the behavior, as difficult as it is.
I totally agree with all of that. And in terms of finding, you could say, where is the most vulnerable space? Where is the center of what's going on in my life? Another question can be, what am I most ashamed about? What is it that I don't want to say aloud? Well, what I don't want to say aloud, that's what I need to work on. So if it's really hard for me to say, I'm Lars and I'm working on lying, well, then that's probably what I need to work on, because it's hard, because that's actually what is going on in my life and I'm ashamed about it. Or I am Lars working on pornography. And if that's really where shame is, well, it's because it's happening and I need to work on it. And the list goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's so hard, isn't it? Because we naturally want to run from things that we're ashamed of. So to actually face up to it is such a brave thing, but so important.
It really is. And I remember one person saying, and I was almost laughing when she was saying it. I wasn't, because I kind of knew what was going on, but still, she said she felt so ashamed about going into the group the first time and saying her name, and I'm working on low self-esteem. And I was like, you're ashamed about that? What about, the things that I have kind of said in my life? But for her, that was really the vulnerable place that she felt most ashamed about. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? So there's no kind of objective, this is the most, shameful thing. It's about what's going on inside of us.
And I think if you can connect to what you've just said, Lars, and say, this is the most vulnerable thing, this is the thing I've hidden, the genius of the process is in saying it in community with other people on the same journey as you is so transformatory, even at step one. Just the moment where you say, I'm Jamie, I cannot rest. And I remember saying that in front of my church family, who hear me week after week talk about trust and believe and what the Bible says, and say, actually, I can't rest, and I haven't rested on a holiday for a decade. That's really healing, to be seen and to be really known, and to think this is my reality, is really transformatory.
I completely agree. And I think just thinking about if someone's kind of wondering what to work on, one suggestion that came to my mind was that, and I guess you spoke about it earlier, Jamie, and that is involving others in it. And obviously they need to be someone trusted, but actually a really good friend or a partner, or even a steps facilitator, to just talk it through and be able to kind of work that through with someone else. Like, we're not designed to work through things on our own. It's good to bring people in and help work that through. And the other thing I've seen people do is, sometimes there's two things and they're just not sure. And sometimes they say, well, why don't you just obviously come to the introduction, maybe read chapter 1 with both in mind and just see how you feel. And it could be that one kind of feels more pertinent than the other. But really, there's no wrong one. I mean, some topics might be more helpful than others, but it's not, I needed to tell myself this the first time and hear this, is actually, there's not a perfect way to do it. And actually, I needed to be free of that kind of pressure to get it right.
That is so true. The pressure doesn't help us. So it's actually really good to lay that one down. And I mean, in my case, I found out by actually hearing someone else's story. And there's a bit of that going on at the introduction as well. So just coming to the introduction, for most people, that is a help as well in terms of tuning in. And hopefully just our little conversation here as well, maybe a help in terms of tuning in. Oh, this might be kind of the area that I need to look at, and perhaps even no, it's actually this particular way of responding or behaving or whatever it is going on in my life.
And I think it's a funny phrase, isn't it? Work on. Because actually the process is quite the opposite, because it starts off with, I can't. And I remember the first time I realized, wow, this is big, and this is pride, and this is in my bones, and this is in the way I think and the way I'm speaking. This is so deep. And coming to an awareness of, wow, I can't work on that. I've worked on other things, but I don't have the capacity, the determination, or even know where to start on something that's so pervasive and so deep and so everywhere. And I would say to people, if you're in that place where you think, I literally don't know where to begin, and it terrifies me that this would change, I know it's really painful, but the moment of honest powerlessness and I can't manage this, that is such a gift. And I know right now someone who's listening would feel, yeah, that's not a gift. I'm in agony and pain and I'm going around this awful circle. But it really is a gift. And on the other side of it is help and a new way. And I think I did the process so many times, working, really being diligent, pulling my socks up, really determined, did all the exercises, watched everything, took loads of notes. And it took me a while to realize, even partially, I can't.
I really agree. And I think when we say work on in steps, we would say, no, I can't work on this alone. But in steps, we are together. It's a we process, isn't it? Which makes a huge a huge difference. And then we are also inviting the higher power or God, or however we perceive that we invite, or him, we invite into the process as well, which allows us not to be the big fixer or the one needs to sort this out, but we find our own little small place in that whole setup where many others are involved. And I think at this point where we are just before the process, many of us would feel very much alone in what we are struggling with. And therefore, I think it's a very strong point that you are making, Jamie, that's not going to continue. It's not you fixing this in this process. It's something that is happening in community, and we end up finding out that our bit is a very little bit, and then it's God doing the big bit.
That's a great encouragement and reminder. And actually, I'm really encouraged for when I do it next. It is just so powerful being in community where we're all working on our own thing, but doing it together in the presence of God or our higher power. So we'll leave it there. I hope that was helpful to anyone listening if you're wondering what to work on. And remember that you can always reach out if you want a conversation, either ahead of the introduction, at or after the introduction. And we hope to see you soon.